His statement, Mr MacAskill said at least 8 times that he was responsible for the decision, but at least 8 times he sought to pass the blame onto others, from Jack Straw on one hand to a superior Scottish national character and a so-called higher power on the other. Why did Mr MacAskill visit Al Megrahi in prison? What was said? Will the notes be published? And was an appeal discussed at that meeting? And above all, why make that visit when there was not one but 2 appeals in progress? What advice did he take from the Crown Office on that matter? We now know that Mr MacAskill did not need to visit Al Megrahi in Greenock Prison. A written representation was all that was required, despite what he has said. How many prisoners can elect to have a minister visit them in their cell, even if they have a well-equipped set of lawyers perfectly able to write a letter? And doesn't Mr MacAskill's comment on the use of Scottish compassion mean that no prisoner, however bad their crime, will ever have a request turned down again? What the First Minister and his government have done is to split Scotland, split our country within itself, and split our nation from many international friends. Next week, Colonel Gaddafi can parade Al Megrahi as part of his 40th anniversary celebrations. Next week, will the Scottish Government support a vote in this Parliament to restore our national reputation? Otherwise, the defining image of the SNP's 4-year term of government will be rued by many across our nation for many, many years to come.
Cabinet Secretary.
The decisions for timetabling for this Parliament are a matter for the Bureau and ultimately for the presiding officer. But I say to you, Mr Scott, as I said last Thursday, it was my decision and my decision alone. I stand by it and I live with the consequences. But can I say, with regard to other matters, you know I didn't speak to the Crown. That would have been entirely inappropriate. As you should be aware, we do have separation of powers, and it would have been contrary and wrong to them for me to have approached them, and therefore I didn't. In terms of papers and process, we are looking to release as much as we can, but we do also have to make sure that those who have written, those who have cooperated, those who have given evidence, not on the basis of perhaps of their being released, have at least to be given the courtesy to say whether or not they wish their names, the testimony, the information they provided to be released. But you have an absolute assurance from myself as the Justice Secretary that we will seek to provide those papers. With regard to just 2 final matters, can I say I appreciate that this is your current position as the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Can I say you did raise questions about whether this would be a position for future people. Can I say I did look back at those who had been given compassionate release before, and under the terms and watch of Jim Wallace, a former leader of the Liberal Democrats, a child killer given a life sentence was released. Clearly, he committed but 1 life, not 270. But as I say, he was prepared to follow due process and, I believe, to adhere to the values of the people of Scotland. And finally, can I simply quote from another former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Lord Steele, who said on radio this morning, it was clearly made on compassionate grounds, referring to my decision. It wasn't made as part of a prisoner deal. It wasn't made as part of a trade agreement. And I think people should focus on that. And I think most opinion in Scotland, therefore, is in favour of the decision to release him on compassionate grounds. It may be that you take a different view from Jim Wallace and indeed from David Steele. But I repeat what I said at the beginning. It was my decision. I stand by it and I'll live with the consequences.
Order. Order. We come now to open questions. I have 30 members wanting to ask questions, and I'm very keen that everybody who wishes to ask a question should be able to do so. I must therefore insist that questions be very brief and answers be as brief as they possibly can be. I call Michael Matheson to be followed by Richard Baker.
The Cabinet Secretary be aware that others outside Scotland have criticised our legal system and the application of justice in this case. We will also be aware that there is a wide range of support for the decision to release Mr Megrahi on compassionate grounds, support ranging from the former First Minister Henry MacAskill to the Law Society of Scotland. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that if a prisoner fulfils the criteria set down in our justice system for compassionate release, as Mr Ali Megrahi did, then to deny that release would be to politicise that decision? And can the Justice Secretary confirm if anyone who has ever met the standards in this criteria before has ever actually been refused compassionate release?
Secretary.
No, I can confirm that apart from those who failed to meet the criteria and were taken out at SIFT, no Cabinet Secretary for Justice has ever refused any application for compassionate release since 2000. That is how the position is. That is the guidance in the laws of Scotland that I followed as they followed before me.
Richard Baker, followed by Trish Marwick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. When will the Cabinet Secretary publish the advice he received on his decision to meet Al Megrahi personally, given that it is clear he was not required to meet him? How would it have been out with natural justice to decline a meeting in person when, after all, the Cabinet Secretary did not meet personally with the American victims' families? And given that the media knew about this decision a week before those families, will there be a full leak inquiry into this appalling error?
Cabinet Secretary.
Mr Baker is quite right. I didn't meet with the American families personally. That wasn't possible. But we did have a video conference link with families simultaneously in New York and in Washington, and we were able to exchange, and I listened for over an hour to those matters. In respect, as I say, of the information and papers, we are seeking to make as much available as possible. We have to make sure that those who contributed, those who provided, are able to give their consent. If they do not consent, then it would be inappropriate and wrong, I think, of us to publish that. But that, as I say, will be dealt with. In terms of any leak inquiries, can I say there has been a huge amount of speculation here. I am told that the Sunday Post, I didn't read it myself on Sunday, said that the decision had been made and they knew of it 4 weeks ago. The Times of England, this great organ of British establishment, said that I had made a decision to refuse it. There was a wider range of speculation. But as I said, I made my decision on Wednesday, 19th August 2009. I made it public on the 20th of August 2009, and I stand before the Chamber of the Scottish Parliament today to account for my actions, and I stand by them.
Tricia Marwick, followed by Elaine Murray.
Presiding Officer, may I remind the Cabinet Secretary of the 4 words intertwined on the mace: wisdom, integrity, justice and compassion, and that these are the values which underpin the actions of the Parliament and the Government. Is the Justice Secretary aware of the many expressions of support from some of the victims' families, the Church of Scotland, as well as Archbishop Conte that he mentioned today? And there still seems to be some confusion about what is meant by compassionate release in Scots law, and I wonder if we would set out more fully what that means and the guidance that underpinned his decision.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the guidance that underpins my position, as I say, is laid down in the guidance within the Scottish Prison Service rules that have been followed both by my predecessors and indeed by myself. Equally, as I said, it wasn't simply the laws and indeed the guidance in Scotland, but the values. You referred quite appropriately to Archbishop Conte. Equally, I am glad in Scotland that there is ecumenicalism on this, because the Reverend Ian Galloway, convener of the Church and Society Council of the Church of Scotland, said, "This decision has sent a message to the world about what it is to be Scottish. We are defined as a nation by how we treat those who have chosen to hurt us. Do we choose mercy even when they did not choose mercy? I understand the deep anger and grief that still grips the souls of the victims' family, and I respect their views. But to them I would say justice is not lost in acting in mercy. Instead, our deepest humanity is expressed for the better. To choose mercy is a tough choice, and today our nation met that challenge. I made that choice. It was a tough decision, but I believe that I followed due process, and I believe that I stood up for the humanity that we pride ourselves on as a people."
Elaine Murray, followed by Bill Aiken.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In the weeks following the horror of the bombing of Pan Am 103, the people of Lockerbie offered support and succour to the families of the victims, and this was particularly appreciated by the relatives of the 180 Americans who had died in the skies over Scotland. And a relationship of trust and friendship has continued now for over 20 years. How many of the families of the American victims did the Cabinet Secretary for Justice consult as he was making his decision to release Abdelbaset Al Megrahi on compassionate grounds? What account did he take of their views? And, other than speaking to the Deputy Chief Constable of Strathclyde Constabulary, what advice did he receive on compassionate alternatives? Did he fully explore those compassionate alternatives, which would have enabled those families to feel that the promise to them that Al Megrahi would remain in Scotland for the duration of his sentence had been honoured?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I say to Dr Murray, as I said to Annabel Goldie, I think the suggestion that we could have sent Mr Al Megrahi to a hospice in Scotland was frankly ludicrous. We have people there who are dying, they are terminally ill. They go there to spend their last moments with some tenderness and to be able to meet with the bosom of their family, not to be turned into a media circus, which is what would have happened.